On a time, in a future where cities floated high in the sky, a young girl named Lila dreamed of adventure. She lived in a small pod with her grandfather, who was the last gardener in their floating city. The ground below was lost to the past, covered in metal and concrete. People had forgotten about nature, except for Lila and her grandfather. One day, while helping her grandfather in their small garden, Lila discovered a tiny seed hidden in the dirt. It was unlike anything she had seen before. It shimmered with colors and seemed to pulse with life. Excited, she showed it to her grandfather, who examined it closely. "This is no ordinary seed, my dear," he said with wonder in his eyes. "This seed can connect us to the world below." Lila was curious. "How can a seed do that?" she asked. Her grandfather explained that each seed held the magic of life. If planted, it could grow into a powerful plant that could restore the earth. Lila's heart raced at the idea of bringing back nature. They decided to plant the seed in their garden, hoping for a miracle. As days passed, they cared for the seed, watering and nurturing it. One morning, they noticed a small green sprout breaking through the soil. Lila's excitement grew. She watched as the plant grew rapidly, its leaves stretching out and flowers blooming in brilliant colors. The air around them filled with a sweet scent. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath them, and a bright light surrounded the garden. Lila gasped as she saw a vision of trees, rivers, and fields of flowers. "Look, Grandpa!" she cried. "It's showing us the world beneath." The plant began to glow brighter, and Lila felt a connection to something much bigger. The people in the Sky City noticed the light too. They gathered around, curious about what was happening. The bright plant spoke to them. "Remember the beauty of the earth. It is not gone. It waits for you to care." Inspired, the people realized they needed to restore the world. Together, they gathered resources and worked to grow more plants. Lila smiled as she watched everyone unite for a common cause. In time, green life began to spread from the floating cities down to the ground. Lila realized that one small seed truly could change the world. It sparked a new beginning, where humans learned to cherish nature again, making the earth alive and vibrant. Thin green shoot breaking through the dry earth. It was so small, barely noticeable, but it was alive. Ari's heart raced with excitement. Word spread through the village, reaching the ears of neighbors who had once laughed at him. Curious, they gathered around Ari's field, eyes wide with disbelief. "Look!" shouted Pedro, the carpenter. "It's a miracle!" Marta, who had doubted Ari the most, found her way to the front. "It's beautiful," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "I never thought this could happen." Ari's heart soared. With that tiny green shoot, hope began to grow not just in his heart, but in the hearts of the villagers. Inspired by Ari's determination, they started to bring their own seeds, their own drops of water, and their own hope. Children rushed to help, carrying small cups of water and tiny seeds found in their own homes. Every day, more villagers came to join Ari in the field. The community came together, laughing and working side by side. They dug up the ground, planting their seeds in rows beside Ari's little shoot. They talked and shared stories, exchanging ideas and dreams. In the evenings, they gathered around Ari, who became a storyteller, sharing tales of how the land had once flourished and how they could bring it back to life. Weeks passed, and the tiny green shoot grew taller, its leaves reaching out toward the sun like eager hands. Ari tended to it with love, praying that it would survive. Meanwhile, more plants began to sprout alongside it, nourished by the care of the villagers. The once barren field was now dotted with bright green sprouts, a tapestry of life slowly returning to the land. As the weeks turned to months, the villagers worked tirelessly together, their laughter filling the air like music. They shared their triumphs and their challenges, learning from each other. Everyone felt their spirits lift, hope was spreading, and the village was transforming. One day, as the sun began to set, Ari stood in his field, surrounded by the villagers. The plants now stood tall and strong. Some had even started to blossom with beautiful flowers. The sight brought tears to his eyes. "We did this together," he said, his voice steady. "Every seed, every drop of water, every whisper of love returned life to our land." As the villagers cheered, a light rain began to fall, gentle and soothing. They laughed and danced, celebrating the rain that had come just when they needed it most. Ari looked up at the sky, grateful for the gift of the last seed. In the heart of a once barren land, life returned in abundance, and together they learned the true power of hope. They had discovered that even the smallest seed could bring a community together, uniting them in joy and purpose. The fields were green again, and laughter filled the air, a sound that hadn't been heard in far too long. From that day on, Ari was not just a farmer, he was a symbol of hope for everyone. And as the seasons changed, the village grew, nurtured by friendship and love, forever holding on to the lesson learned from the last seed. The last seed, original. In the heart of a land where the sun beat down with relentless fury, there existed a village named Sarenhalo. Once, Sarenhalo was a place of vibrant life, where fields of golden wheat danced in the breeze, and the laughter of children echoed through the streets. But those days were long gone. Years of drought had turned the land into a desolate wasteland. The river that once nourished the fields had dried up, leaving behind a cracked bed of despair. The villagers, their faces etched with sorrow, had lost all hope. Among them was an old farmer named Ari. Ari had spent his entire life working the land, his hands as weathered as the soil he tilled. He had seen good times and bad, but never anything like this. His heart ached as he looked upon his barren fields, the soil cracked and lifeless. The villagers had started to leave, seeking refuge in distant lands where water still flowed. Ari couldn't bring himself to abandon his home. This land was in his blood, his history was rooted in the soil. One morning, as Ari was cleaning his barn, he stumbled upon something extraordinary. Hidden in a dark corner, beneath a pile of forgotten tools, he found a seed. It was small, dry and fragile, but as he held it in his palm, he felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. He didn't know where it came from, or how it had ended up there, but he knew he had to plant it. When Ari told his neighbors about his plan, they laughed. "The ground is dead, Ari," they said. "Even hope won't grow here." But Ari was not deterred. He had nothing to lose. He knelt in the dust, his old bones protesting with every movement, and pressed the seed into the earth with trembling fingers. Every morning, Ari walked to his field, carrying a jug of water that was almost empty. It was the last of his reserves, water he had been saving for himself. But he didn't drink it. Instead, he poured a handful onto the spot where he had planted the seed. "You are not forgotten," he whispered to the soil. "You are not alone." Days turned into weeks, and still nothing sprouted. The sun continued to scorch the land, and the wind carried whispers of despair. Ari's hands became blistered, his body ached, and his heart grew heavy. Doubt crept into his mind. Maybe his neighbors were right. Maybe hope was a fool's errand in this desolate place. Yet, he couldn't bring himself to stop. He continued to water the spot, his determination fueled by a stubborn refusal to give up. Then, one dawn, as the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, Ari saw something that made his heart leap. A thin green shoot had broken through the ground. It was small, almost invisible, but it was alive. A single spark of green in a world of brown. Ari stared at the shoot in disbelief, tears welling up in his eyes. He had almost lost hope, but the seed had not. It had waited patiently beneath the surface, gathering strength until the moment was right. Word of a sprout spread through the village like wildfire. At first, people were skeptical. They had seen too many false dawns, too many promises broken by the relentless drought. But curiosity got the better of them, and they began to trickle back to Ari's field. When they saw the tiny green shoot, something shifted within them. A spark of hope, long dormant, began to flicker. They started to bring their own seeds, seeds they had saved from better times, seeds they had almost given up on. They brought their own drops of water, water they had been hoarding for themselves, water they now shared willingly. Old Man Hemlock, the village elder, was the first to speak. "Ari was right," he croaked, his voice raspy from disuse. "Hope can grow, even in the most barren of lands." Inspired by Ari's unwavering faith, the villagers began to work together. They pooled their resources, sharing what little water they had. They dug irrigation channels, diverting the meager streams that trickled down from the distant mountains. They sang ancient songs of rain and renewal, their voices rising in a chorus of hope. The green shoot grew taller, stronger. It unfurled leaves that reached towards the sun, as if in gratitude. Other seeds began to sprout, tiny green shoots emerging from the parched earth. The field, once a symbol of despair, was slowly transforming into a garden of hope. The change in the village was palpable. The sadness that had hung heavy in the air began to dissipate. Laughter returned to the streets, and the villagers started to dream again. They spoke of a future where the fields would be green once more, where the river would flow freely, and where their children would thrive. But their newfound hope was soon tested. A band of ruthless raiders, known for pillaging drought-stricken villages, descended upon Seren Hollow. They had heard rumors of water and crops, and they came to take what little the villagers had. Fear gripped the hearts of the villagers. They were weak, outnumbered, and ill-equipped to defend themselves. Some wanted to flee, to abandon their homes once more. But Ari stood firm. "This is our land," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "We will not let them take it from us." Inspired by Ari's courage, the villagers decided to fight. They armed themselves with whatever they could find: farming tools, kitchen knives, rocks. They dug trenches, built barricades, and prepared to defend their village to the last. When the raiders attacked, they were met with fierce resistance. The villagers fought with a ferocity born of desperation. Ari, despite his age, fought like a lion, his eyes blazing with righteous anger. The battle raged for hours, the fate of Seren Hollow hanging in the balance. Just when it seemed that the raiders would overwhelm the villagers, a miracle occurred. Dark clouds gathered overhead, and a torrential rain began to fall. The rain poured down, drenching the land and washing away the dust and despair. The raiders, caught off guard by the sudden downpour, panicked. They lost their footing in the mud, and their weapons slipped from their grasp. The villagers seized the opportunity and launched a final, decisive counterattack. They drove the raiders back, forcing them to retreat into the desert. As the rain continued to fall, the villagers rejoiced. They danced in the streets, their faces turned towards the sky, their hearts overflowing with gratitude. The drought was over. Seren Hollow was saved. In the days that followed, the fields blossomed. The river began to flow again, its waters replenishing the parched land. The villagers worked together to rebuild their homes and replant their crops. They knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but they were no longer afraid. They had faced the worst and emerged stronger, more united, and filled with hope. Ari, the old farmer who had found the last seed, became a hero. He was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can take root and flourish. He continued to tend to his fields, his hands still weathered, but his heart filled with joy. And so, Seren Hollow was reborn. From the dust and despair, a new chapter began. The village became a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of perseverance, community, and the unwavering belief in the promise of a single seed. Ari, the old farmer, had been living in the dusty, drought-stricken land for as long as anyone could remember. His hands were rough from years of toil, and his hair was as white as the clouds that rarely appeared in the sky. The sun beat down on the fields, making them dry and cracked. It was hard to remember when the last rain fell, and even harder to see a future where crops would grow again. As despair wrapped its arms around the village, Ari stood determined, unwilling to lose hope. One sultry morning, while cleaning out his barn, Ari stumbled upon a single seed nestled in the corner, covered in dust. It was small, dry and fragile, but something about it sparked a faint glimmer of hope in his heart. He carefully picked it up, feeling its weight between his fingers. He looked out at his barren fields and made up his mind. He would plant it. When Ari shared his plan with the neighbors, their laughter echoed through the village like a mocking wind. "The ground is dead," they taunted, shaking their heads. "Even hope won't grow here." But Ari felt a fire inside him. He knelt in the hard, cracked earth, carefully digging a small hole for the seed. He pressed it into the soil and whispered, "You are not forgotten." Each day, Ari made his way to the field. With a jug of water, the last he had saved, he poured a handful over the spot. Each drop felt like a gift from the sky. He whispered to the soil each morning, "You are not forgotten." The sun rose and set, the days turned into weeks, and hope felt heavy on his heart. No sign of life appeared, but Ari remained steadfast. His hands began to blister from digging in the dry ground, yet he never gave up. Each time his neighbors met him, they would shake their heads and mutter about lost causes, but Ari simply smiled. "You will see," he would reply. One quiet dawn, As Ari arrived at his field, he noticed something strange. A thin green shoot had broken through the ground. It was small, almost invisible, but it was there. Hope rushed back into his heart like a river after a long drought. He knelt closer, his eyes wide with wonder and disbelief. "You are here," he whispered, tears filling his eyes. News of the tiny sprout spread through the village like wildfire. People gathered around Ari's field, astonished to see the life that had returned to a place thought dead. Among them was Marla, a kind-hearted woman who had watched Ari work tirelessly. She was inspired by his stubbornness and brought her own seeds to the field. "I want to plant these," she said, her eyes shining. "Your hope is contagious." Others joined in too. Soon, children raced to fetch seeds from their homes, and mothers filled extra jugs with water. Each person brought their own hope and dreams along with their seeds. They planted them alongside Ari's single sprout, and laughter filled the air for the first time in years. The village felt alive again. As the days turned into weeks, the fields began to transform. Little green sprouts pushed through the earth, creating a patchwork of life. Ari and his new friends worked together, caring for the young plants, watering them with love and laughter. The once desolate fields were now a canvas of green, vibrant against the blue sky. In the days that followed, Ari found himself turning into a leader, guiding the villagers as they tended to their growing garden. They shared stories, laughter, and even food gathered from the small